Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario in the upcoming 2026 midterms for both the Senate and governor's races, in which what if President Donald Trump were to force a military draft? You heard me, a military draft. Because it could be possible, as the U.S. Army is now raising the maximum age requirement from 36 to 42, now at the very oldest, which could hint possibly a draft in the future. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but why else would they be doing this? I'm not quite sure. We don't have an actual answer. And also, they are easing marijuana restrictions as well. So, this may or may not be a sign that there will be a draft. Now, this could be hypothetical. I'm making this as a scenario and how it would affect the map. Just imagine a Democrat's best case scenario for the midterms. That will be their dream. This will definitely put the nail in the coffin for the GOP. But before we get started on how these maps would look like, make sure you guys are subscribed, click the bell so you don't miss out on my content. Press like button, share this video. Don't forget, if you're interested, we have memberships. You can find links to that in the description section. So let's start from left to right, meaning we're starting off with Alaska Senate race. You have Mary Patola, Democratic candidate, who recently lost her House race in the 2024 election. I know she lost, but it was a favorable year for Republicans. She got unlucky. She only lost by 4 points. And don't get me wrong, I believe she would have a better chance if she ran for governor rather than Senate because Dan Sullivan is just such a strong Republican. But she would absolutely win in this case if Donald Trump were to force a military draft, meaning I believe it would have to get past the Senate and the House or something like that. And if that does happen, for whatever reason, then Alaska will definitely flip blue. Just envision a blue tsunami, not just a blue wave, but a blue tsunami. That's how I think the midterms will look like. So you can go ahead and give Mary Patola the victory. In Alaska, I don't care how good Dan Sullivan is. That would absolutely hurt Republicans up and down the ballot. The entire nation. You might even see protests. Because who in the world would want a draft? That would be absolutely nonsense, and it will be the end of the Trump administration. I believe it would have to be unanimously in Congress, but regardless, even if it was unanimous, I would still expect the Democrats to impeach Donald Trump when they win back the House. So if that's the case, Alaska's going to be blue. You have Texas. Believe me, it will be blue as well if Trump, forces a draft and it gets passed. And even if it doesn't get passed, that's crazy. That will severely shift the map towards even more to the left than it already was going to be. Now, don't get me wrong. Democrats are not supposed to win the Senate. I currently have Republicans at 85% odds. Democrats only at 15% chance to win the Senate. I currently have Republicans getting 51 seats to Democrats 49. So this map is so favorable for Republicans. But if there is a draft, then you're going to see a shift, basically a 180. So James Talarico is going to win if there's a military draft. I can guarantee you that right now. He's already doing good. He overperformed in the primaries. Not only did he defeat his opponent, but he got more votes than anybody, including the two Republican candidates. Democrats, outnumbered them in terms of raw votes in the actual outcome. So even if he goes up against John Cornyn probably has the better chance over someone like Ken Paxton. But it's not 100% guaranteed Cornyn wins, especially if the draft happens. James Talarico has the momentum. I see him winning Texas for the first Democratic senator in this state in a very long time. I believe a few decades, more than 30 years. I believe that's the real number. So Georgia's already going to go blue regardless if there's a draft or not, but the margin will just increase. You can argue likely. I'll be generous for Republicans. I'll say lean, just because to respect Raphael Warnock, I won't have Jon Ossoff winning by more of a margin than Raphael Warnock did. So if I would say Jon Ossoff wins by likely, that would be more of a margin than Raphael Warnock won by, which would not make sense. So in respects to Raphael Warnock, I would say that Jon Ossoff would not win by more of a margin than he does. So I would characterize it lean instead of likely. I'm being generous for Raphael Warnock, just because he is better than someone like Jon Ossoff, more popular among African Americans in the state of Georgia. So, this would be the map so far if Trump enlists the military draft. North Carolina is already going to go blue. Roy Cooper is very good. He's a good Democrat. He can win over not only independents but Republicans as well. This would be likely instead of lean. So right now, for a regular prediction, for like the actual, midterms, I would say lean for Cooper by about 4 points. Now, if there's a draft, he can very well go up to possibly 7 percentage points. Republicans' turnout will be horrendous. And it's not because Democrats are doing good at all. They're not. It's just because their approval rating is out. The Democrats' popularity is at all-time low, by the way. That's not the reason why they win. The reason why they win is not only because Republicans' approval rating is also low, but not as low as them, but because of the draft. And Donald Trump, and also this is a midterm, and Donald Trump's administration is the incumbent, and in midterm elections, the incumbent party always loses, and especially in the House, not so much as the Senate. And by the way, the presidency usually affects the Senate more so than it does for the governor's race, but for this video, we're going to make it affect the governor's race because the draft is just such a big deal. And then as for Ohio, you have Sherrod Brown going up against a decent Republican, John Husted. Now, in a regular scenario, I would have John Husted defeating Sherrod Brown. Sherrod Brown lost in 2024. I see him doing better this time around, but especially if Trump forces a draft, and it doesn't even have to get passed. The fact that he does do that will really turn away voters, and Sherrod Brown will win Ohio. He will flip it back to blue for the Democrats. You have Michigan, the last state before we move on to the governor's map, will be lean blue. You have Mike Rogers, I believe, going up again. He recently barely lost narrowly in 2024 against Alyssa Slotkin. It was a more favorable year for him. Now it's more favorable for the Democrats. Trump is not on the ballot, and especially with a draft, he's going to lose no matter how bad the Democrat candidate is. If there's a draft, it's an automatic L for Republicans. It does not matter. Lean blue. So this is the map, my official Senate map prediction if Donald Trump enlists a military draft. 52 to the Democrats, so total opposite of my regular prediction, to 48 Republicans, excuse me. So 52 to 48 Democrats take back the Senate control if Trump forces a draft before the November election. So let me know what states you agree with or disagree with in the comment section. The governor's race, let's start from left to right. Again, Nevada, beginning off with Nevada. Joe Lombardo, I just can't see him losing. That's really hard for me to imagine or envision. Even if there's a draft, I think he will distance himself from Trump, even though he didn't really in 2024, I believe. I think they were close, but still, he's just so popular. Regardless of the draft, he would win, but it's going to be extremely close by under percentage point, obviously, tilt margin. Arizona, Katie Hobbs will definitely win this by a lean margin. I currently have her winning it by tilt margin, but it would shoot up to a lean just because there's a draft in general. She ran a shadow campaign in 2022, defeated a very flawed candidate, Carrie Lake. You can argue that if Republicans nominated literally somebody else, it doesn't matter who it is, it just wasn't Carrie Lake. Other than Carrie Lake, Katie Hobbs would not have won. Now, if there's a draft, Katie Hobbs would absolutely win re-election. She already is on track to do so, even without a draft. So, Georgia, and by the way, Texas won't be solid red for the governor's race. I currently do in a regular scenario, but if there's a draft, it'll definitely drop down the margin, just not enough for Democrats to win, obviously. Georgia, Republicans are most likely going to win this. The Democrats don't do good for the governor's race in Georgia as much as they do in the Senate, and they are doing better in the presidential general elections. But Georgia likes Republican governors similar to Nevada, and they like Democratic senators similar to Nevada. So those states are actually pretty similar. I would say it's tilt red. It would be extremely close because Democrats will get tremendous support if Trump forces a military draft. You have the state of Nebraska. Dan Osborne, the independent independent who ran in 2024 and lost to Deb Fischer by 7 points, is going up against Pete Ricketts, a very strong Republican. It is impossible for Pete Ricketts to lose this race. I know that's me saying this, but there's no way he's going to lose, even with the draft. Nebraska voters are too conservative here. I know Dan Osborne can win a lot of the Republican, support, and just a little bit, and a lot of majority of moderates, independents. Just too much for him to overcome a candidate like Pete Ricketts. So with the draft, Ricketts wins by a point. If I had to assume a margin, it would be very close. Not enough for him to get unseated there. And then Iowa, I believe this could possibly flip blue. I've been going back and forth on this. If Trump installs a military draft, they will definitely possibly vote a Democratic governor. but I think it'll narrowly go Republican. I would say tilt red. It will be extremely close, and Iowa's not far away at all from voting a Democratic governor as of right now. Now in the Senate, it's a different story. It's quite harder, but for Iowa's governor's race, Democrats can definitely win this. So I won't be surprised if there is a draft and Iowa does vote Democrat for the governor. And then Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy is currently trailing Amy Acton in the polls. That's quite normal. Same thing happened with Sherrod Brown. Democrats in Ohio polling typically do better early on, and then their lead winds down as we get closer to the election. I expect the same thing to happen, but if there's a draft, that's not going to happen actually. If there's a draft and the whole thing changes, a total different scenario. Therefore, Amy Acton will be Ohio's next governor as a Democrat if a draft happens. And in Wisconsin, I believe this will be lean blue for Mandela Barnes. I think he's an okay Democratic candidate. He's pretty much the best they have, replacing Tony Evers. Republicans, you have, I believe, somebody else, a new Republican running for Wisconsin's governor's race. And I think, Mandela Barnes is on track to win by a lead margin in this case. And in Michigan, you have John James, who gives Republicans the best chances as of right now. I currently have him winning by a tilt margin as Michigan's next Republican governor, because it's not odd for Michigan to elect a Republican governor. I believe they did so in the early 2010s before Gretchen Whitmer, but they're coming off of a Democrat governor, obviously Gretchen Whitmer, for a very long time. Maybe they would want to switch and parties and vote Republican, but if a draft happens, John James will get extremely unlucky. I would honestly feel bad for him because I think he can very well win. Keep in mind, the main reason for this is because it's a three-way race, and the third independent candidate, I believe is an independent, is hurting the Democrat, which is why John James is on track to possibly win. That's what the polls are suggesting. That's what I'm suggesting. But if there's a draft, regardless of that third candidate, it's, hurting the Democrat. It won't, because there's a draft, and that's obviously going to hurt anyone with the R, the letter R on their name on the ballot. They would automatically be avoided, or just maybe possibly not avoided, just they won't show up to vote, because why would they do that if Republicans are installing a draft? That would absolutely make no sense. Now, I would say Wisconsin will be more bluer than Michigan would be for the governor's race in general, regardless if there's a draft or not. And in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro is going to win by a solid likely margin of somewhere in between 7, 8, or 9, or 10 percentage points. Not as much as he won by last time, but if he's popular already. A lot of Republicans support him. I think independents as well. I think he's done a good job. I think people of Pennsylvania think he's done a good job. And if that's the case, then especially if there's a draft, he has no competition. He's going to win comfortably, as he did. So 24-26, this is my final governor's map if Trump forces a military draft. And we go back, this is my Senate map. So that's pretty much it. One last fine reminder is to subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss my content. Press the like button, share this video. Don't forget we have memberships. If you're interested, you can find links to that in the description section. Thank you everyone for watching.